My friend Dr. Chris Wakehurst works at the James Cancer Research Institute at Ohio State University. Dr. Wakehurst's team has gained notoriety for conducting breakthrough research on deoxyribonucleic acid, better known as DNA. In essence, DNA holds the blueprint for almost everything there is to know about us: the color of our hair, certain aspects of our personality, and even our vulnerability to certain types of diseases. As DNA is passed down from generation to generation, we notice certain patterns and similarities between the parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents. We often hear things like, "Oh, she's got her mother's eyes," or "Wow, he looks just like his grandfather." The same is true of every local church. Each church has its own DNA, its own blueprint or fingerprint, if you will. And if you take a close look at its blueprint, you can tell many things about a local church. Several years ago, I had the privilege of spending a week with Pastor Steve Cordell and his staff. Steve was the founding and lead pastor of the Crossroads United Methodist Church in the Pittsburgh metro area. And during our time together, I began to understand the DNA of a cell-based congregation. You'll find much of what I learned in his book, The Church in Many Houses: Reaching Your Community Through Cell-Based Ministry. Steve planted the Crossroads Church using the best models available at the time, keeping up with the trends and forming the church around proven methods of church growth. But after about 7 years, he began to recognize that even though he had a growing congregation, the people were being trained to be church members instead of disciple makers. They had become comfortable with membership activities such as attending worship regularly, believing the basic doctrine of the church, contributing money, living a moral life, and serving where they where they were needed and able. So Pastor Steve came to realize that the DNA of the church had to change. He began to see that the church should be formed around two fundamental principles: cell and celebration. To have one without the other would be like trying to fly a plane with only one wing. So over a period of time, Pastor Steve led the church in making 5 distinctive shifts, from growing deeper to reaching outward, from membership to disciple maker, from educating to equipping, from programs to relationship, and from church with cells to a church that is cells. He taught that cells are the most basic expressions of the church, and that essential purposes of the church are fulfilled through cell. And corporate worship springs out of the life-on-life experiences found in the smaller group. And so that corporate worship was not an event to attend. It was a community of believers coming together to celebrate the goodness of God. People didn't go to church. They realized that they are the church. Pastor Steve spelled out the fundamental principles of a cell-based church. Cell groups are not inward-focused, but they're outward-focused. The cell-based church is to help equip Christians for the ministry of making disciples who make disciples who make disciples. Cell-based churches employ a distinctive and deliberate disciple-making strategy. And so cell groups were more than just a Bible study. At its essence, a cell group is a set of Christ-centered relationships which are focused primarily on evangelism and discipleship. They understood that discipleship is better done in a personal and a relational context. Well, I arrived at Crossroads Church on a cold Pittsburgh morning in February. I entered the building and was greeted by the children's pastor, and wouldn't you know it, within seconds, this young staff member was telling me how she came to know the Lord and what a difference He had made in her life. She handed me off to a volunteer who showed me to our meeting area, and wouldn't you know it, before our journey ended, I heard another story of how Christ had transformed this person's life. Over and over throughout the week, I heard story after story of transformed lives. We were invited to stay at the home of one of the church members for the week, and wouldn't you know it, every evening we would stay up late into the night talking about how God had been changing lives through personal relationships and small groups. Today, after over 20 years, the Crossroad Church is a vibrant, disciple-making community that worships in 5 different locations throughout the Pittsburgh metro area.